Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Tom Abeta. I am the Director of Admissions here at Oberlin. Welcome. If this is your first webinar that you're being a part of for this, during this time of celebration as you're considering what college to have your student enroll at, welcome. If this isn't your first webinar, then welcome back. And so you might see some familiar faces, and it's difficult for me, but just because as we do these webinars, right, it's harder because I'm not seeing, my audience. And so this is that time of year that we would typically, be in maybe a big ballroom, and we'd have, parents and students and families visiting us from all over the country. And so I do just want to say a welcome. And I want to say congratulations, to obviously to the students. There may be some students joining us, but I know this webinar is a webinar specifically focused on parents, right? And we do know that's why I thought I would open up with Bobby McFerrin with "Don't Worry, Be Happy," just to kind of set the tone. I know that many parents out there might have grown up in the 80s, so if you think about that, it was released in 1988, right? And so either you might have been in college already, you might have been in high school, getting ready to pick out your, if you're the guy that cummerbund for your prom or whatever, or right, or you might have maybe been in middle school, right? And so we just don't know the ages out there, but I do want to just say that this is a moment where I think that we should, kind of relax and just take a deep breath and take it all in. It really is a time of celebration. And what I would typically do is if I was in an audience of families, I would typically ask parents that if this is your first child going through the college process, would you please raise your hand? And if that's you, again, you can raise your hand if you're in your room, if you're whatever. I can't see you, but you can still raise it. But I know that typically I would say it's almost a third of the audience at any one time, sometimes up to 40% or so of the audience. It might be families that, hey, this is the first child in my family that's going through the college process. And so it's an exciting time, right? That in just a few months, it may be a time to say, goodbye and transition and have them come out to campus. I do want to let you know that Oberlin, we have been in session this whole year. And so just to kind of thinking through where we've been at as a college is that we decided to de-densify. And so we went from our traditional 2 semesters, a fall and the spring, we went to 3 semesters. And so we had students in the fall, now here in the spring, and we're also going to have a summer session. So we decided to kind of have some classes, either if you're a junior or a sophomore, that you would come either fall, summer, or spring, summer. And then if you're first years or senior students, you were here for the fall and the spring. And so just kind of a different year, but we were in person. We've been in person. Students are on campus. I'm actually broadcasting from my office here in Oberlin. And so that's what we did this past year. And we're continuing to do that. So a lot of classes are in person. Some are remote. Some is a hybrid. But what we're planning for this next fall, and I know you guys are curious about that, is that the plan is that we're going to be back to 2 semesters. We're going to be in person. Students are going to be, living in the residence halls. They'll have roommates. The idea is to start probably at the first week of October for the fall semester. And so orientation and a lot of that kind of stuff will happen late September. All the specific dates are coming out. Those haven't been totally finalized yet, but I just want to kind of lay the groundwork, because that's what we're planning on. And I know that, especially just kind of given where we're at as a nation, it's been a crazy year, right? And that we've all had to go through just a lot of changes, particularly for students during their senior year, if it's been fully remote, if it's been hybrid, if it's figuring all this stuff out. But we're at a point now where we're feeling, better. I think that with vaccines being available every day, and I know in the state of Ohio, it's now vaccines are available for anyone 16 and older. It's available. And so I know that there are many parts of the country where maybe, restaurants didn't even open up until maybe just a month ago. And so I know that there's just been a lot of changes. And so, but we are looking forward to kind of being what the new normal is going to be. And that means, doing it with safety in mind, with following guidelines with the CDC, and we're always working closely with those entities to make sure that we're going to continue to provide an in-person education that's quality, that's rigorous, but one that we want to make sure that our community is safe. And so that's our plan, right? And again, if you haven't seen kind of just a general overview of Oberlin, there's many opportunities to go online, and you can look at information sessions, and you can look at all the stats and stuff. But just as the 1 minute overview, right? We're a community of about 2,800 students that we have two main divisions. It's the College of Arts and Sciences, as well as our Conservatory of Music. And then there's a crossover where, again, it's about 600 students in the conservatory, about 2,300 students in the College of Arts and Sciences, and then a crossover of about 180 students that pursue both in our double degree program. And so if your student is one of those students that was admitted double degree, man, they're some of our best students in the college are also double degree students. And so what a great way for students to have a rigorous musical study, but as well as have just a great full academic experience. And so we get students from obviously all over the country, and nearly all 50 states are represented, about 40 different foreign countries. So we are a full residential community, right? Where students are required to live on campus all 4 years, 5 years, right? Again, if you're double degree, and students have that option, they're guaranteed housing for all four. And so it's a place where not only are students learning together, right, but they're living together and they're experiencing life together. And so I know that the focus of this webinar tonight is going to be one where it's about learning a little bit more about student life and about the academic setting here at Oberlin. And so we have a great panel with us today. And so what I'm going to ask is that we also have a couple of staff members on the back end here that will be helping us, Jess and Bill. And so you might see blank screens up, but again, they're helping us in the background. And so what we'd like to do is that we're going to spend the majority of our time doing Q&A. And so if you have questions, you can begin to use the Q&A and type those out. And then what we'll do is we're going to do our best to kind of answer those. But right now, I'd love to have our panelists introduce themselves. So they're just going to tell you again. I'm going to call out their first name because I know everyone on the panel here. But again, they'll give you a little bit more in terms of who they are, what department they represent, and their experiences with Oberlin. And so I'd like to open up and have Jan. Jan, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then if on the back end, if we can make sure that whoever's speaking and the speaker view, so that it'll take up the whole screen.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Virtual Oberlin. It's really nice to spend this evening with you. My name is Jan Miyake, and I am an associate professor of music theory here in the conservatory. I'm also a double degree graduate of Oberlin College, where I majored in mathematics and viola performance. So I am finishing up my 19th year of teaching. After having spent 4.5 years here as a student, I am now officially, I think, from Oberlin. And my favorite thing about Oberlin is that the students, there's no doubt about it. When I was a student here, I didn't really understand how outstanding Oberlin students are. I thought it was just normal. And I went off to grad school and was a little over-prepared actually for grad school. And then I came back to teach, and I experienced the most extraordinary growth, both kind of intellectually and socially, of my life from interacting with students. They are challenging and respectful and smart and inquisitive and curious and sometimes demanding, and it's always a joy to work with them. The roles that I have played on campus, I've been an associate dean for academic affairs in the conservatory. I have been a posse mentor, which is mentoring, a really intense mentoring, 4-year mentoring program. And I've chaired the musical studies committee and done a few other things. I really love Oberlin and am very invested in it, and really happy to answer your questions today.
Thank you so much, Jan. And then Gina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gina Perez, and I use she, her, hers, and I am a professor in the Department of Comparative American Studies. I'm a cultural anthropologist by training, and I've been at Oberlin for 17 years. I like Jan. I would say that one of the most amazing things about being at Oberlin, my favorite part about being at Oberlin, is the students. I'll give you a very concrete example of that. Is that just this week, a group of students and faculty and staff came together to organize a teach-in on Monday night to address the ongoing anti-Asian and anti-Asian American violence that has plagued us as a nation, not only just recently, but the past year. And it was a really beautiful moment that brought together not only staff and faculty and students, but also we had over 150 people on the webinar, and a lot of them were Oberlin alums, and also the parents of students who are currently in residence here at Oberlin. And we got a lot of really great emails afterwards thanking us for that webinar. But for me, it just reflects some of the best things about Oberlin, that not only are the students bright and really challenging and inquisitive and curious, but they're also really committed to making this world a better place. And they put that, they enact that in so many different ways. And I feel really fortunate to be a faculty member to work with students in that way. I teach Latino studies within American studies. And like Jan, I've worn a number of different hats. I've also been a mentor for Posse students for 4 years. I also do a lot of intense mentorship around research for students, and have worked with students who are currently now getting their PhDs in places like Stanford University and across the country. And that also is pretty gratifying to work really closely in a mentorship relationship and see students really develop their research skills over the course of their last 2 years at Oberlin. So I'll stop there, but I would be happy to talk with you and answer any questions you might have about living and learning at Oberlin. Welcome.
Thank you, Gina. I do know that also you have a little bit of experience about sending maybe a kid or two off to college. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
I do. I actually have a son right now who has been admitted to Oberlin and is considering Oberlin. So I know what it feels like to be in your shoes. And I also have a son who is graduating from college right now. And unfortunately, he has not been in person. He's been in residence, but has not had any in-person teaching. And we've had a couple of conversations about how challenging that's been and what a difference it's been for him versus what my students have experienced here at Oberlin. So I would also be happy to talk about what it's like to be at the end of the college journey, and also to be in a position where I'm sending a kid off as well. It's you better strap yourselves in. It's a roller coaster ride, but a good one, a good one.
Thank you, Gina. John?
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. And I guess I should introduce myself. I'm John Harshbarger. I am Director of Student Health and Counseling. I have been here at Oberlin for 17 years. And I have to say, it's been really an amazing experience for me. I have over 30 years of experience in higher education, and I've worked at many different institutions in Ohio. And Oberlin really is a very special place. And we've talked about what we really enjoy about Oberlin. And I have to say, I mean, certainly the students are a complete joy. And I guess I want to give an example of that too. A different example is that the beginning of this year, with the pandemic, we made this plan, and a plan for students to come back. But part of that plan, and we knew we were relying on the students to make this work. And it was a heavy, heavy ask. And we asked students to come back, to wear masks at all times when they're engaging with each other, to remain 6 feet apart, and to not party, basically, to not congregate. I mean, I think probably many of us who've been in college, can you imagine what that would be like? Our students did it. Because our students are committed to each other. I mean, that's what I really love about Oberlin, is that this sense of, it's not just about me, it's about my community. And I feel so strongly about that. And I feel like, to make the choice to come to Oberlin is saying, yes, I'm committed to my fellow person, and you will feel that here. Because the second thing I was going to say too is, and I really appreciate about Oberlin, are the staff, the faculty, people who work here. Your student will be intellectually challenged, and they also will be cared for. We are people of mind and heart, and we really do bring both when we work with your students. So I feel like you've made a great choice. I have a 17-year-old who is a junior in high school, and I am hoping he chooses Oberlin. You know, he's like, he looks at me like, Dad, come on, you work there. But you know, with that said, I'm still hoping he does choose Oberlin, because it is a great place to go to school. It's a great place to work.
Thanks, John. Adrian?
Thanks, Tom. Good evening, folks. I'm Adrian Bautista. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am Assistant Vice President of Student Life here at Oberlin College. So in that role, I work directly with the Vice President, Dean of Students, and other leadership folks throughout the division. And actually, I'm fortunate that some of the appointments I have also helped me interact with arts and sciences and academic affairs. So I'm also the POSSE liaison. You've heard folks talk about POSSE. I am the Mellon Mays Undergraduate Fellowship Program coordinator, and that's a research, undergraduate research program for our folks. You know, and what I would highlight is that, you know, the community building component. So John really, I think, emphasized community, and I've highlighted for you some of those ways in which I get to work with students. And so whether it's the residence halls, through student organizations, you know, I'm also the faculty advisor for our Newman Catholic Student Organization. There are just so many ways in which our students build community, not only with each other, but with faculty and staff. And so I think that's what really sets Oberlin apart. I will say I'm also the father of a first-year student in college, not here, but at another institution, and very proud of him. He just did his resume this week. It took him into the second semester, but he has done it and said that I am to blame for that. So, you know, again, and I have a daughter who's 14 years old and a first-year high school student, so I'm anticipating getting ready for the whole process again. So again, I think we are a very caring community. We believe in interaction and communication with our parents, and maybe a little later I can tell you about our share program and other ways in which we interact with you all. Thanks.
Thanks, Adrian. And then last but definitely not least, we have a current student with us today. Olivia, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. So my name is Olivia. I use she, her. I am a fourth year musical studies major from Manchester, New Hampshire, also with a German minor. Currently at Oberlin, or over the past 4 years, a musical studies major, a liberal arts degree in music kind of implies that I've been all over the place at Oberlin. But currently, in this moment, I am the vice president of our Conservatory Council of Students, which is a student governing body for the conservatory. And I kind of wanted to highlight the ways that I found community here at Oberlin. And there's so many different forms that looks like. But I think based on the areas that I've studied in the most, those all kind of reflect really unique parts of community and support at Oberlin. So per my musical studies degree, I have mostly studied choral and orchestral conducting and education through our pedagogy, advocacy, and community engagement department in the conservatory and the college, anyone can take it. But I've been super involved with ensembles here on campus, both leading, directing, facilitating, and performing. One collaboration that I did last semester was with Tiffany Chang of the Arts and Sciences Orchestra, and we did an international virtual collaboration. I was the chorus master of this choir for the Beethoven Choral Fantasy. And we also worked with the orchestra at the University of Rochester. And that was just an example of how I was still able to maintain a musical community during COVID virtually. But also this past semester, I was able to conduct the Oberlin College Choir, which is an ensemble I've been in for so many years, and we've performed at Carnegie Hall, and I've been the ensemble manager for that as well. So very much all over the place in terms of ensembles and conducting. But that has been a huge form of community for me personally. That's where I find community and support from students. Yes, and then also per my education studies, that also represents how I found community with the town of Oberlin, because we share so much of the same space. Through my practicum in education studies, I've been an America Reads tutor at a local elementary school. And in terms of that being one way to engage with Oberlin, the town. I have also been a staff director at WOBC, which is college and community radio. So many community members have radio shows. And also like down to me going into Carlisle's flower shop every other day and knowing the animals around the corner. That's another example of how intimately I've been ensconced in the beautiful town of Oberlin. And then also through my German studies, that is an academic area, one academic area where I have found incredible support in terms of just the language department community at Oberlin, and also living in a language-based house and having incredible faculty support, helping me like apply for a Fulbright, get summer scholarships, be able to travel abroad. So all of my studies very much represent different kinds of community and support that I've found at Oberlin. And I love hearing the professors on this panel talk about students being their favorite thing at Oberlin. Very much my why Oberlin now as I graduate, even looking back on it, has been the professors. And that's something we might talk about on this panel. So I will leave it at that. Thank you so much for introducing me, Tom.
Olivia, I don't know if I caught like where you're from.
New Hampshire, New
Oh,
England.
right. And then
Yes.
did you know your major when you first got here? How did that happen?
I came in just knowing I wanted to study music in some way. I had attended an English, creative writing, comparative literature degree, but then I took my first semester was music theory 1, music history, college choir, voice lessons, just boom. And I was like, I'm in it. And then I ended up having a degree. So, but I followed the passion academically. So yeah, that's how it happened.
Well, I know that if you joined us later, or if you weren't here for the very opening part, we were just doing a series of kind of introductions of our panelists. We're going to spend the majority of the next about 40 minutes or so answering questions, right? And so the focus of our time is to really get a better sense of the student life and the kind of the academic setting here at Oberlin. And so that's why we have a couple professors with us, a few professors, some administrators that represent, you know, kind of the general like student life and counseling, as well as a current student. And if you haven't already, you can begin to start to type your questions into the Q&A. And I know that for sure we're not going to be able to answer, you know, all the questions. Hopefully we'll get to most of them. I do have a couple of my colleagues in the back end that are, if there are certain questions that are just kind of easy to answer, that are at least shorter or something that can be pretty straightforward, they're going to try to answer those directly with you. And then in addition to that, then we're going to be, I'll be kind of feeding questions out to our panelists. And so we'll put it on gallery view. If it's not already on gallery view, we'll have that, we'll do that. And then, but I know there are a couple questions in here that I just wanted to address right away. There was one, is just here about, is Oberlin on good financial footing? COVID has been challenging for many colleges, and I've heard that there are some financial concerns. And again, that's a great question. And I know that, I know with many families, and again, across the whole nation, we've just experienced, this has been a very trying year this past year. And I know it's affected people in many ways, you know, personally, you know, in terms of mental health, but as well as financially. And I know that, you know, we've seen a lot of small businesses really struggle and that kind of thing. I just want to assure you that Oberlin is yes, everyone's been affected by COVID, but we are on strong, solid financial footing. You know, when you hear about other colleges that are potentially closing down or closing their doors, that is not where Oberlin is at all. In fact, even prior to COVID, we had already enacted kind of a strategic plan to kind of what are our next steps as Oberlin to make sure that we're going to be around for at least another 150 years. And so I know that, you know, at least even just a lot of times you can tell the health of an institution just by, again, sometimes what are measurable numbers, but even just by the size of their endowment. I know Oberlin's endowment is now over 1 billion, right? And so we're fortunate enough to have the resources available. And so yes, COVID has had an impact, but it's not impacting in terms of the type of education that we can deliver. And so that's what we're doing. In fact, we've added more faculty to Oberlin. we're not having it in terms of impact the type of educational experience that we want to deliver to students. And that's at the core of who we are as an institution. So I do want to just, answer that right away. And then another question was out here. I know there are some specifics about when we do start this next semester. Is it going to be, what are the requirements? Are students going to be required to be vaccinated and so forth? We're still, we haven't, come out with that yet. And I know that our president is going to be addressing many of these kind of larger issues and these questions on April 12th. And so if you haven't already signed up for that, there's going to be a special webinar featuring President Carmen Ambar, and she's going to be kind of addressing the college and kind of the future and really sharing her vision and where we've been as an institution over this last year, but then where are we headed? Where are we headed at long term? And so she's going to be addressing many of those things, as well as we're going to adhere to CDC guidelines. And for right now, we are in person. Students are wearing masks. They are practicing social distancing. We're doing that. We're de-densified at this moment. And so, and then vaccines are available to anyone in Ohio at 16 years of age or older. And so we have not required it of students, but many of our students have gone and been vaccinated. And I know that as we look to the experts, to the health experts, I know that they're thinking that, vaccines will be available. And as we've surveyed our community as students and faculty and staff, much of the community has said, yes, we definitely want to get the vaccine as soon as we can. And so I think many of our students have already gone and gotten vaccinated. And so, but we'll have more specifics on that to come. And there is also a site on Oberlin's, our OB-Safe site, that if you want some more information about just the plans and things that have rolled out this past year, there's many specifics on our website. Okay, let me get to some of these other questions here. Let's see, thank you for addressing some of those in there. Yes, I see that as we're, it looks like as a survey, right, over 90% of students indicated on a survey that they would get vaccines, and many of our students, right, have already gotten them. So faculty and staff as well. So and then I do want to say that we're actually, Oberlin as a site, we're approved as a vaccination site. And so that is something that is happening here soon. And so we are well on our way to kind of making sure that we are going to do everything possible to make sure that Oberlin is going to be a safe community. Let's see here. For John, obviously everyone has struggled emotionally to varying degrees over the past year during this pandemic. The consequences of these struggles are likely to last into the coming school year. What kind of resources or plans are in place to support students?
That's an excellent question. And I feel like we are so well resourced here at Oberlin. So just to know, we have a counseling center that has currently 6 full-time therapists. 3 of us are psychologists. We have 2 licensed counselors and a licensed social worker. We also have 2 psychiatrists on staff who are both part-time. And with them, they bring 2 psychiatry residents. So altogether, we actually have a full-time psychiatrist on our staff, which is pretty unheard of for a college our size. So in terms of just resources for students, I feel very fortunate with what we have. And going forward, I mean, this year we have been providing all of our therapy and psychiatry sessions have been provided via Zoom. We are hopeful going forward into next year that we will be in person and potentially also via Zoom. So, but we offer both counseling and psychiatry at no charge to students. We also have crisis walk-in hours Monday through Friday. We offer also in the afternoons, we have what's called Let's Talk, which is a consultation time for students just to drop in if they just have something they needed to talk about right away. We also have a 24/7 counseling line. So it's a phone line that students can call at any point, day or night, and that is 365 days a year. So it can be during breaks and so forth. So I feel very fortunate that we are so well resourced.
I know there's another question in here. Thank you, John. what do you do to help freshmen transition successfully, right? So that first part of like what happens when students are transitioning to college life. Gina?
So I can talk a little bit about the academic side of it. So sometime in the summer, before your student arrives, they will be contacted and be told who their faculty advisor will be, or who their advisor will be. It could be faculty or staff, and that's a really important relationship that really helps to set the tone, I think, for the next 4 years. This relationship is one where students are required when they come to campus to meet with their faculty advisor even before classes begin, to meet twice, to talk about the classes that they're thinking about taking. Oftentimes, I've done this obviously for 17 years now, and there's always incredible enthusiasm and excitement, about what kinds of classes they're going to take. But sometimes there's students who are a little, kind of nervous, and so this is a moment also to kind of figure out, like, what are students' interests? What are some areas that maybe they want to grow in, and trying to identify what classes that they might be interested in and taking that would fulfill those needs. And so, so I think in that sense that students are very well prepared once they come to campus and are thinking about what that might look like. And then they have about almost 2 weeks to kind of, maybe either add or drop classes depending on kind of maybe how their ideas about what they want their first semester to look like changes. But that relationship with the mentor continues, meeting periodically throughout the year. We as faculty have office hours. Unfortunately, this year those office hours have been on Zoom, but students are very good at using Zoom to meet with us during our office hours. And so, but students often will just stop by. And I think that for those of us who are in this role as mentors, we often reach out to our first year students just to check in with them, especially that first semester, make sure that they're doing well, making sure that they're adjusting, that they're joining clubs, or building the kind of community that I think Olivia so beautifully articulated. So at least from the academic side, those are some of the concrete ways that as a faculty member, we're helping to transition your students to a really exciting academic landscape here at Oberlin.
Thank you, Gina. And again, we are a community of about 8,600 permanent residents in the town of Oberlin. And again, so with the faculty and staff that are here, close to 90% of faculty live in town, right? And so it is kind of this living, growing community that is very supportive. And so yes, it's Zoom meetings with faculty now for office hours, but when things kind of hopefully get more to kind of normal or pre-COVID times, it wasn't uncommon, right, to meet your advisor for coffee, or I say, oh, I babysit for this professor, or I'm going to go to my professors, they're inviting the whole class over for dinner, and that's the type of community that it is. I wonder, Adrian, if you could just touch on the support services in terms of even what would briefly happen during orientation and some of the other support services that are available for students, helping them transition.
Of course, yes. I think to add to what Gina said, first of all, I do want to add that part of that goal of having students work on their schedule in the summer is to really reduce the stress of trying to create your full schedule once you get here. So please know that's a very intentional effort that we make, as well as introducing folks to their PAL, and that's a peer advising leader. So, and the PALs are actually really formally and well connected to our first year seminars as well. But the PAL is exactly that, someone that your student in sort of smaller groups, I believe they're usually in groups of 12 or so, it's sort of a cohort. They have a peer advising leader who is, again, a returning student, someone who knows the ropes and they can ask questions to and get better acquainted with. And then they organize activities according to their PAL cohorts as well. So please know it's a really intentional effort to connect someone to a peer. And it's one thing I want to emphasize is just, I think one real strength of Oberlin is our peer leadership on campus, right? And be that an RA, student organization leaders, PALs. I think your students will meet other students who are just so invested in them and really wanting to help them through that transition. The other thing I will say, and I'm always looking for the silver lining in the pandemic. And one of those things was it really forced us to think about orientation and what we can offer remotely. And so please know we're actually going to continue some of that. Our goal is to not overwhelm students that first week. So what are some things we can offer 1 or 2 weeks before students actually get here and before parents actually get here. Some of our sessions that share some information on financial aid, some things around student conduct, much of that will be offered before students get here. Again, not only to help them prepare to get here, but to sort of ease that schedule a little bit so we can focus a little bit more on community building. The other aspect I will speak to, which is really important, those first residence hall meetings. So meeting your RA, meeting the professional staff members for folks that live in certain living and learning communities or program houses or theme halls. Getting to know those folks and the mission of those halls is really important. And so that all that said, we are also then just having a lot of fun, right? So meeting student organizations, there will later be a community connections fair where folks are actually meeting folks in the community that they may potentially do service with or volunteer with. It's just a range of sort of fun stuff, concerts, getting to know folks that we're really excited about. So that's a little bit about orientation, Tom.
Thank you. I know there's a question in here that's a little bit related to that, is that what about accommodations for kids with ADHD and executive functioning? And then a follow-up to that is how accommodating are professors for students with learning difficulties?
John, I'll start, and then I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, but I'll say we have a well-resourced Office of Disability Resources that will work with folks for formal accommodations, right? Be that in the classroom or housing and dining. Those are areas that students can receive accommodations. And of course, faculty will receive communication. I have as a first year seminar instructor that may include things around helping provide students with notes, things of that nature. The other resource I will say is we have a range of courses. It's called LEAD, is the sort of prefix LEAD. Many of those courses are related to executive functioning, time management, things of that nature. So again, I think we're really well researched. And the other thing I'll add, I think this is connected to your student making the transition, or if you're concerned about them, I mentioned in my introduction, SHARE, which is an acronym for the Student Help and Resource Exchange. It's actually an online system where anyone on our campus and off campus, including you as parents, can submit a form and just say that you might be worried about your students, not for sort of emergency safety related things, but our RAs often will submit share forms if they're noticing a student just doesn't seem to be connecting quite as they hope socially. Faculty will submit those if a student misses a course or two. So it's really our way of getting help early on with a student when we notice something, and reaching out to them or reaching out to you if you want to consult with one of our share advisors. So John, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Adrian, I think you did a pretty good job. I just want to say that, in our office, we do work with a number of students who have ADHD and learning disabilities. And they have stated to me that faculty have been very responsive and are very, accommodating and will work with the students. So I have never really had any student bring up, with me at least, any concerns or issues around accommodations. I do want to say, in terms of students who do have ADHD and you come to Oberlin, our psychiatrists will work with your student in regard to medication. And what we do require, though, is that the student comes with some formal testing, or if they've had a working relationship with a psychiatrist in the past, then we just would need to join with that psychiatrist, get some documentation, and then we can work with that student.
Tom, I just want to quickly add to that. We never want finances to be an issue with getting help as well. So one of the things I do in the Dean of Students Office is administer our emergency funds. It's under an umbrella called OB Cares. You can actually look at our website. It has an application there. And John and I are always talking about if a student needs to get off site, even if it's paying for a taxi to get to a healthcare organization or actually paying for something additional around their care, or even eyeglasses. That's another common thing. Students break their glasses and can't afford to get another pair. We have lots of resources to help with that.
I just want to add, from the professor side, we get a letter, email. It's very clear about what the accommodations are, and it makes it really easy to meet those accommodations with the student. And I usually follow up by reaching out to the student and say, hey, let's talk about ways to make sure you get the most out of this class. I really enjoy working with accommodations because they always force me to think differently as a professor. And often what is good for one student is good for everyone in the class. So that's been a really wonderful thing about working with students with accommodations.
Thank you. I know, let me just say this, Oberlin's academics are rigorous, right? And it is an intensive academic place. but I don't want to describe Oberlin as this ultra competitive place, right? It's not where students are competing against each other, right? That's not the place. A lot of collaboration happens, and I think that students are working closely with their peers, with faculty members to really make sure that they're going to be successful, right? And it shows, right? Almost 2/3 of our students will go on to graduate schools, many of them to professional schools, law schools, medical schools. And then nearly 1 in 5 of our graduates eventually earn a PhD, right? So we're the #1 producer of like PhD candidates in the country. If you look at it over the last century, that, so we're definitely sending on students that are doing, their own original research and everything. And so it's a great supportive community, but it's one where we want to make sure that students can be successful and they have the support necessary. There's a little bit of a transition here of even just talking a little bit about what's Oberlin's commitment to diversity, right? And this particular person said they're familiar with Posse, but even beyond that, and then a second follow up to that is even what about the LGBTQ plus community on campus, and how is that supported too? Anyone want to take on that? Gina?
Well, I saw Adrian unmuted himself. Do you want to go first, Adrian?
Go ahead, Gina.
Okay. So, so one of the things that I really enjoyed at Oberlin as a professor is working closely with the Multicultural Resource Center. So it's a really important kind of space on campus that supports students around issues of diversity and inclusion, but also has been a space for Latino students, African American students, Asian American, LGBTQ students, and that has been something that helps to also cultivate student leaders. It helps to develop different kinds of programming. Like right now, we're fortunate to have a range of different programming around anti-Asian American and Asian violence that have been happening. As I mentioned, the teach-in we did on Monday. We had an alumni webinar on Wednesday. There's also an Indigenous Women series that's running right now. And so that's one space I think that specifically supports students. Also at this time, President Ambar has convened and developed this presidential initiative on racial equity and inclusion that really has really taken on the question of issues of racial equity, to think about kind of how Oberlin, given our history, can even do better, around some of these issues and really be a leader around issues of racial diversity. And I think actually Jan is one of the members of that committee, so maybe you can speak a little bit to that as well, Jan.
Yeah, sure. I'm really honored to be the chair of the curriculum and pedagogy branch of that committee. And I would say that what we're doing is really exciting to me. We're looking at some of the structural ways that we could do better with equity and diversity. Rather, we've always been really good at, I think, really good at little communities and speaker series. We're looking at policies, inclusive pedagogy, curriculum, and really what I find very exciting structural things that have that deep impact on the fingerprint of the institution. It's hard work and it's slow work, but it's a rock star committee. I'm really excited to be on it. And the present leadership on the institution, I have every confidence that we are going to see both strong recommendations come out of this and those recommendations implemented. In my experience, this is the first time that Oberlin has done this kind of real close look at racial equity and diversity inwardly. And what can we do better at Oberlin to make this a place where all students thrive and all faculty thrive and all staff thrive. And it's a really exciting initiative, and I'm really proud of the institution for asking some really difficult questions and looking at some really sometimes ugly truths and trying to make them better instead of ignoring them.
Thank you, Jen. I know Oberlin, you might read Oberlin in the news and might have certain controversies or whatever. I just think that it's a community that is willing to take on some difficult conversations and actually have dialogue about it and not just sweep it under the rug. And so I know at times that gets meant. So, but it's definitely a community that's willing to kind of take some of those on. I know that the second part of that question was just a comment on support, or just a comment on the LGBTQ plus community.
And so I'll add to that, because one of the programs that we're working with, partnering with the faculty, by we I mean the Multicultural Resource Center, with Gregor Mattson and his nightlife course. Gregor Mattson has done a lot of work around the LGBT community and social organizations. So there's actually been a lunchtime series that the MRC has partnered with Gregor on, called Disco de Janeiro. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but it's actually, there's a website, folks even offsite can come to those lunchtime sessions. We're planning our Lavender graduation ceremony. You know, we plan lots of things around particular times of the year. Gina mentioned the Indigenous Women series. There are programs within that we're also looking at the LGBT community, or having sessions that are really intended to highlight to the LGBTQ community in that experience. So, you know, the other thing I will add, though, to just this broader topic, is the way in which we connect with the diverse communities outside of Oberlin College, right? And so, in fact, Gina and I just today were in a meeting, we're in a weekly meeting with the Lorraine Historical Society in El Centro, which is the oldest Latinx serving social organization in the county. Gina started a Latinx oral history class a few years back, and it's really, I think, sparked that ongoing communication. And I also want to give a shout out to Jan, who does lots of work around thinking around diversity from the conservatory perspective as well.
Great. I know there's a specific question here for Olivia, right? It says that, can you please speak to other colleges to which you were admitted and what led you to choose Oberlin overall over others? And if possible, can you address what was the biggest challenge that you found as a first-year student when you came to Oberlin?
What a fabulous question. Where to start? There's so many facets to my why Oberlin. I would say Oberlin College, the value of there are many values to large universities in their own right. That is where I am looking in the future, since I also intend on going to graduate school. But the value of having such a small communal undergraduate school of the liberal arts means that I have direct access to so many platforms and opportunities that I wouldn't have otherwise had. One instance for me is conducting. That's musical performance. In terms of going to a school with a music school and a large state university, that means that I would not have as many performance opportunities. It means that graduate students would be taking that role, because that's what they're there for, in terms of research and in terms of practical hands-on opportunities. So conducting is the space where I'm on the podium from my second year, but essentially that also extends to things like our undergraduate research program, where students are able to work side by side with professors and have such hands-on opportunities, where Professor Miyake said, you know, she got to grad school and felt kind of over-prepared in that sense, where Oberlin students are just equipped with so many different resources. Students are getting published, they're writing their honors theses. There's a 2-year summer research fellowship. So in terms of just having access to so many opportunities, that while you're doing them in the moment, they just feel wonderful. But if you're looking to go to graduate school, which many of our Oberlin students do by the degree, or by count of the people who go on to get PhDs, you're just equipped with so much from the get-go. Another reason why I chose Oberlin from other schools, it's a small anecdote. My uncle is actually a musicologist, really big into the music industry and popular music. And I asked his opinion of, kind of laid out the schools that I was looking at, you know, applying to schools, and he chose Oberlin first. He kind of like slid the laptop towards me and he was like, I like this one. And I was like, please elaborate. And he essentially said that there's no other community that he's felt so musical, where art in so many forms permeated to the very smallest corners of Oberlin students' lives. And when I toured Oberlin and when I got here to Oberlin, the diffuse music like life is unlike anything else. And I feel like something that we say at Oberlin is that we do have 500 concerts a year. And a challenge during my first year was I very ambitiously took that tagline to heart. I was like, I'm going to absorb all the music I possibly can. You cannot, because classes happen and recitals happen, and recitals happen at the same time as other recitals, and it's such a huge thing. And that's changed a lot because of COVID, but the amount of music in so many different forms. And I'm essentially majoring in how college students can be involved with conservatory life, but more so all the different various nuanced ways that music can happen on campus. And I was asked once in a separate student panel by a student, what kind of students don't fit in at Oberlin. And the panelists and I agree that one, Greek life, we simply do not have that. And second, if you don't like music, it's such a large thing at Oberlin, and that personally mattered so much to me. So those are a few why Oberlins, and then also the student professor relationships. Our student to faculty ratio in the college is 11:1, and in the conservatory it is 6:1, and I'm in both of those places. And there is just something so satisfying about going into your 101 course, introduction to the entire department, and you have the chair teaching your 101 class. Like, there is nothing stopping you between your learning experience and the absolute master in their field. And office hours, there's just such an availability for professors to be there for you. And I feel like when talking to my peers throughout their college experience, the times where they have had professors that didn't show that kind of heartfelt support, like they aren't remembered. And in terms of my narrative at Oberlin, because professors are very different and nuanced, not everyone is the same, but the narrative that I can tell based on my Oberlin story is how absolutely resourceful and there for me my professors have been. And that extends to, like, I've been into my professors' houses. I've had dinners with them. I've met their family, and they have written me incredible recommendations and shown up for me in ways that are just fantastic. And I think all professors at Oberlin kind of know, and based on this panel, they have such a love for students. That is very evident to me. Oh, and the second part of that question, what was the hardest thing during my first year? Oh my gosh. Trying to be myself, I think. Social cloud at Oberlin, different groups, different cliques. This is very much not on the academic side of things, but it is a real student experience. Coming in with so many other students from so many other walks of life, and so many different parts of the world. God, I really wanted to fit in. And eventually it took a year to be like, be yourself. And that's really how you make friends. And that is how I made a lot of my friends, through OSCA, our Student Cooperative Association, through WOBC, through music, and going to events that I really liked. But I think one of my biggest struggles during my first year was who I wanted to be, and definitely that shift from high school to college. And also with that, I came from New Hampshire, as I mentioned, but very much like nuclear family, white suburbia, which is totally fine. But when I came to Oberlin, and throughout the last 4 years, it has just been, there's a word for it in German called Bildung, which is essentially an education, but it's very much a reckoning and unlearning, and recognizing my positionality in the world and all the things that you learn when you go to a school, and recognize that the world is very big and there's so much to learn. So those are a couple of things, and I could go on forever. I hope that answer was helpful, and yeah, there's so much I could say.
Thank you, Olivia. And I know you actually answered like 2 or 3 other questions that came in already about, like, what do students do for fun, kind of difference about being in a smaller place. And again, with 500 plus concerts and recitals, 40 to 50 different theater and dance productions, 2 major operas a year, 175 different student organizations, 21 varsity sports, and a bunch of club things. And then that's just, students still have to go to class, right? You still have to do all these things. And I know there's lots of things to do for fun, but Olivia, is there a drinking culture on campus? Like, would you say that you have to drink to have fun?
You definitely don't have to. I won't lie, and I say this on my tours, when they're in person. Parties do happen at Oberlin. It's kind of inevitable, and I wasn't expecting it, because I definitely had a connotation of like a small town Ohio, and that quickly went away because it is a college. But you do not have to drink to have fun at all. And in fact, all of my favorite experiences at Oberlin have been in Finney Chapel, have been watching jazz combos play, have been at the WOBC cover band showcase, have been at Folk Fest in Tappan Square, where I don't know about other people, but I was fully in the music. And this is totally a me thing. Like yeah, I mean, there are other ways to enjoy yourself, but in terms of music, maybe it's not a me thing, because I feel like it's a very shared thing at Oberlin, a genuine love for music. So you don't have to. It is there, but it's not an imperative for belonging or community, or not a prerequisite to anything.
So another follow-up question for anyone to answer is just talking about the safety of campus and crime-wise, and like how safe is the town?
Well,
So,
as a longtime-
oh, go ahead. No, go ahead, Jan.
as a longtime resident, I have had no theft. The theft I was expecting was bike theft, which was the only problem that I had as a student. And one might argue that if I had locked up my bike, it would not have been stolen. And I simply walked the campus till I found my bike and I took it back. Yes, it feels very safe to me as a parent. I have three girls, 11-year-old twins and a 14-year-old, and they are allowed to free range in city limits around Oberlin. And I feel very safe. If they need me, they stop a student and ask to use the student's phone, and they call me. And that works out just fine.
That's right. And again, like many other campuses, we have our blue light system on our campus where they're located throughout campus. If you're ever feeling unsafe, you can go and press this button and it'll immediately connect you to our campus security, which is right in the center of campus. So we have our own kind of security force. They can help you if you want to be escorted home from maybe the library back to your dorm room. There's all kinds of ways, just that we want to just incorporate a kind of just a safe community. A little bit switch in terms of some of the questions here, but this is one. I've heard that the campus is progressive and liberal. How is dialogue across the political spectrum, and if one is at the conservative end, how can one fit in?
Well, I could answer that a little bit. I think that that's definitely the kind of the stereotype, and maybe that is also kind of the broad experience. But I teach, I'm teaching a class right now called Militarization in American Daily Life. And it's one of these classes where, I really feel it's such a great class to teach, because I think that it forces students to kind of think about things about people's relationship to the military, for example, or to police forces, or to kind of, or to issues of militarization that they didn't really kind of think about in a particular way until they took the class. But it also is a space to really challenge students on kind of these taken for granted sort of progressive positions. So, for example, we've spent a lot of time talking about what does it really mean to defund the police. What would that really look like? And how might you reimagine what that relationship would be, right? So I think that one of the great things that I appreciate in having small classes, particularly at the upper level, is really being able to create a space for people to disagree with each other, and modeling for students how to do so in a way that is respectful. I don't think we necessarily see that all the time in our dominant political discourse, but we do at Oberlin. And I think that sometimes it's a challenge, in our broader political context, but I think at Oberlin and in our classrooms, I think we really try to model how to disagree. Oftentimes as professors, we take a devil's advocate position to really push students to think about the positions that they're taking. And so, there are conservatives on campus, and I think that they offer a perspective that is important, but there are also ways that all sorts of students are being challenged in how they're thinking about the world and about their politics and their place in the world.
Thank you, Gina. I know we're approaching the top of the hour, and I think we're going to stay longer than 8 o'clock, but I do want to just, for those that do need to leave, I just want to just do a couple quick reminders here, okay? So this is one webinar. It is being recorded, and it'll be on our website. But if you want to check out all the other webinars that are happening throughout, the rest of the month. There are ones specifically on housing and dining. If you think about like research, study away, athletics, kind of postgraduate preparation and outcomes, music, and so many more. And so there are a lot of things happening out there. I do want to encourage parents that today is actually the deadline to sign up for your student to sign up for the Healing Democracy course. And so we're offering a course right now for credit. Even if the student hasn't fully decided to enroll at Oberlin, they're welcome to take the course. We encourage you. What better way to kind of figure out and kind of sample what Oberlin is like than to take a class? It's going to be on Tuesdays. And so starting this next Tuesday, and then there'll be a makeup session on Saturdays as well. And so again, if your student hasn't already signed up, I highly encourage you. They need to sign up by today. Today's the deadline. But even I guess if they missed that, please encourage them. We would love as many people to sign up for that as possible, but it's going to really highlight a bunch of faculty across all these different disciplines. And so it would be really great for you to encourage your students to do that. Another thing is that we do have parent-to-parent hangouts, which means that based upon regions of the country, starting on April 18th, we're going to have many other sessions for parents to kind of interact with other parents and parents that are of current OBs. And so you'll be able to ask a bunch of different questions to that. And then we have a special parent panel later in this month too, April 26th. And so there's plenty of things happening. And if you have any specific questions, if it's regarding financial aid, admissions to the college or the conservatory, your student can sign up for a one-on-one appointment. And those are happening daily. And so that if you had any questions, that we would love to answer those. And so with that, if people do need to leave it, it's at the top of the hour, but we're going to stay for a few more and just try to answer a few more of these questions. If you hadn't gotten your question answered live, again, we had well over 150-ish questions here. And so we were trying to work through those, but I know that my colleagues on the back end have also been trying to kind of furiously typing away and giving you different links also to different areas of our website, but also encouraging you, if you haven't gotten it answered tonight, then there are specific ones out there too. So again, I appreciate every parent, and we really do celebrate you. But one of these questions here, it just says, let's see, can you name 2 or 3 aspects of Oberlin that set it apart from other small liberal arts colleges? And then maybe 2 to 3 aspects that you think Oberlin can or is working on to make it better. And so maybe if we want to go around, if people want to just say, quickly address that. Jan, I see you shaking your head.
I'm really excited by Oberlin's leadership right now. I think that it is savvy and relevant and effective. And I don't know much about the other colleges around here. That I'm not looking at other people's presidents. I don't have time for that. But I have this feeling of hope and can do at Oberlin, even in the middle of a pandemic, even in the middle of higher education really having to take a close look at what it's doing, that I don't know that many of my colleagues going to have. And I think that for me is one thing that sets Oberlin apart. And then the other thing that I think we're doing is really exciting are these integrated concentrations where you pull together courses from lots of different fields that are related, but it's not a major. And what makes it integrated is that there is a hands-on component to it. And I think this is so smart and exactly what we need to be doing with our students is giving them just like that sense of confidence while they're still in the bubble here, that they can do stuff and they can talk in their interviews when they leave Oberlin about what they've accomplished and the kinds of experiences they've had. And so those are 2 things that make me just really excited about Oberlin. And I can't remember if that was exactly your prompt, Tom, but that's where my head was when I was nodding. So thank you.
Yeah, what sets Oberlin apart from other colleges, right?
Tom, if I could jump in, for me, I've always said this, I think it's the amount of help and support that we have for students, right? So I think to the point that students sometimes probably get tired of hearing from folks, but whether that's your PAL, your RA, your academic advisor, we've mentioned so many cohort programs, so you might have an additional advisor, right? Be that a Posse mentor, a Mellon Mays mentor, your Bonner Scholars coordinator. There's just always someone, I think, that's ready to help you. But I would say as parents, if your role could be really, again, encouraging your folks, right? Encouraging your students to reach out to, the counseling center, schedule appointments. When have you met with your academic advisor lately? I think that's a huge role that parents can play, because again, I think like any sort of young person, reaching out to that adult or to even an older student can be intimidating, right? So we have all these resources here and just want to make sure that students feel comfortable connecting with them.
Just to play off that, I know there was a specific question for John, just about health services. Can students get prescriptions filled at the at health services on campus?
Most prescriptions will we can't fill in our service. However, I mean, we certainly can write prescriptions. We have a small pharmacy, so there are some antibiotics that we can fill. But generally what happens is students will go to our local CVS or Walmart. If they need transportation, campus safety will help with that. So, I mean, we have ways to get students to, but the CVS really is walkable when the weather is good. So generally, students don't have a problem getting their prescriptions filled.
That's right. Just as a point, again, Oberlin is a town of 8,600 people, but we have our own hospital in town, right? So there's an emergency room there. There's CVS, there's Drug Mart, there's Walmart. There's all these places if you need prescriptions or just different things that you need to get just for kind of living life, right? That's definitely available here. And then still, we're only about a 20-minute drive away from the next bigger town over. And if you want the, more access, and then we're literally only 45 minutes from downtown Cleveland, right? And so there's just a ton of opportunities in Northeast Ohio, right? We're only 25 minutes from the airport, so we're easy to get to. We are this kind of smaller town in that kind of safe small town community, but we're one that actually has a lot of access to some larger things. And then because we have a world-class music conservatory on the same campus as a full liberal arts college, this fusion of the arts and academics at Oberlin is like no other place in the entire country, hands down. And so this kind of intellectual, artistic, creative place where we say that, students want to come and they want to make a difference in the world, right? And not to say it in a cliche way, just to say, oh yes, it sounds almost like, is that true? Or are you lying? Well, I think our students really do care about issues, and we want to challenge them, and they want to talk about it, but not just talk, but how can I be a part of that change? And that's why we have so many students that are so motivated that they want to, really be a part of change now. And so it's reflective in the type of activities that students do. And so if you want to send your child, right, to a place where they're going to be challenged academically, where they're going to be involved in dialogue, not just in the classroom, but it's natural outside the classroom, staying up to 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning with their roommates and people in their dorms and just talking about issues, but yet being challenged to actually apply it right now on campus in their greater community, doing community service, and then ultimately going on to prepare them to be great thinkers, to be great communicators and writers, and that people will go out and have an influence and opportunities for, possibly even original research and published and being able to continue that wherever they go. Man, this can be a great place to send your student. And I know our president, she always says that, that the faculty and staff at Oberlin are just as dedicated to making sure that your student is going to be successful as you are, and even as a student. And I think it's a really great place to be, that will challenge your student, but one where there's going to be a lot of support for them too. And so any other final words of advice that we have from panelists to parents, that as they're thinking through this process, of if there's a word of advice that you can give to them during this process, any last words that maybe a panelist would love to share?
I just want to emphasize that, both as a professor here and also someone who has a son at another liberal arts college and another one who is trying to decide where to go, that I can honestly say that I'm really proud of what we do here at Oberlin, and that ethic of care happens on just so many levels. And I think it's something that's really special about Oberlin. And I think the decision will be very clear to you and your child once you visit Oberlin and think about other places. What's the best place for your child? And so you have to follow your gut, I think, and just trust your instincts.
I want to add too, as a parent with a son at another institution, when I asked him, has anyone actually called you in this year from the administration or something? Because at Oberlin, actually, our share program and a bunch of other administrators on a monthly basis are calling every first year student, right? Because we want to know how you're doing. We understand how difficult this is. And so I think, again, it's just a reflection of the commitment we have, the support that we're trying to provide on a monthly basis to call every first year student, I hope sends a message to you all about how committed we are to your students.
Tom, if I can add too, that I was thinking about, even, I spoke with 3 parents, and I think, you were asking about, the question about what makes us unique. And I don't know if it's unique about Oberlin, but to know that, we work certainly with your student, but we're also very open to hearing from parents. Now, I know in my profession, I can't share information about our students with a parent, but I'm willing to hear your concern and willing to even talk you through kind of what's going on, with your student. And so to know that I think we're accessible. We're accessible to your student, and we're also accessible to you as a parent.
We're 12 minutes over the hour. I do want to make sure that we're probably going to wrap it up here. There's still almost 200 people, that are joining us here. I do want to encourage you, if you didn't get your question answered live, we will work, if it might have been answered on the back end. If not, we will work to get those answers to you, or at least the right resources. But there are plenty of opportunities coming in the next few weeks here to ask more questions. There's the student hangouts. There's almost something happening almost every single day, right? So plenty of stuff. And I know that we send out a weekly digest on Sundays. And so we send it out, and that gives kind of highlights of what's happening during the week. And then there's definitely plenty of links to our other webinars and special sessions. There's things that happen on a regular basis, anywhere from fun trivia nights and hangouts for students, to kind of learn, get to know their peers a little bit more. But also webinars and special sessions that you'll have an opportunity to interact with faculty and staff and current students to get some more of your questions answered. And like I said before, if it's about a specific area, if it's about athletics or study away or housing and dining, there's some special sessions coming up, and I would just highly encourage you to go ahead and do that. If you do have specific questions that are unanswered by those kind of general topics, then please set up a one-on-one appointment with either, and it could be a brief thing. I believe they're every half hour or every 20 minutes on every afternoon with an admissions counselor, financial aid counselor, or someone from the conservatory as well that can answer questions. And so with that, we're going to end our session. I'd like to thank each and one of our panelists for sharing their insights today. And again, I applaud you, family members, parents, because without your influence, your student would not have gotten to where they are today, and with the great choices that are ahead of them. And so please reach out to us if you have additional questions, but we certainly wish you the best and remain safe as we're kind of all working through kind of every new day. And but we're hopeful, and we're looking forward to welcoming your students to campus this fall.